Good evening and welcome to NewsNight. My name is Addie Deal. Tonight we'll give you all your international, national, and local news. Find out more information about protests happening in Canada and a boat fire in Greece. We'll also tell you more about what a group of students from New Hampshire set sail across the ocean. Lastly, our reporters will let you know what Point Park building we'll be moving to in the coming months, and your weekly Pittsburgh weather report. All this and more coming up on NewsNight. A ferry carrying almost 300 people caught fire in Arakousa, Greece, and is searching for 11 missing people. With 239 passengers and 51 crew members, the Hellenic Coast Guard had to evacuate 278 passengers, including one not on the official guest list. 2 passengers were stuck aboard the boat for several hours until the guard could get them off. After finding the body of one of the 11 missing passengers on Friday, another was found alive in presumably good health after climbing down a ladder to a nearby tugboat early Sunday. Officials say that the guard is still searching for the remaining 9 missing passengers, all presumed to be lorry drivers. The man rescued claims he heard voices below deck while on board. Officials received the call about the fire at 4:30 a.m. while the ferry was on its way to Brindisi from Igoumenitsa. The cause of the fire is still unknown, however. It is speculated that it began in the ship's hold. All rescued crew and passengers have been taken to Corfu for registration and received needed medical attention. Since January, the Canadian government has been facing backlash from employees who were affected by a new piece of legislation put forth by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Nick Konopka has more information regarding the demonstrations and protests that have been taking place.
Over the weekend, hundreds of protesters were cleared from the Canadian capital of Ottawa. Those cleared were mainly truckers who have been protesting the Canadian COVID vaccine mandate since late January. The police were deployed to clear the area after the Prime Minister Justin Trudeau invoked the Emergencies Act for the first time in 50 years. The act gives the Canadian government broad powers to control demonstrations, and those powers were on full display as armed officers forced the protesters and their truck barricades away from the capital. A total of 170 Canadians were arrested in the fray. Due to the rarity of its use, the Emergencies Act was seen as a controversial move by Trudeau, criticisms that the Prime Minister responded to in a speech on Monday. He cited harassment of locals, ideological violence, and the supply chain bottlenecks that resulted from the protests as factors that led to his decision. He also made the mention of, quote, foreign money that has poured into the protests after a GoFundMe provided $1 million Canadian to the protesters. Prime Minister Trudeau also urged the Canadian House of Commons to extend the emergency powers by 30 days, a vote that is set to pass despite strong opposition.
Coming up after a short break, find out more national news, such as what state has a senator under criminal investigation. Also, we'll have a story about a little girl who finally gets to go home after 3 long years. Stay tuned. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, and welcome back to NewsNight. Most of the student body of the Pittsburgh Public School.
Some of the United States allies.
Thursday, the FBI was seen raiding.
Let's get started with today's forecast.
Today's high will only reach about 31 degrees.
It's looking a little cooler than we've seen in the past few weeks.
All this and more.
All this and more.
All this and more coming up on NewsNight.
Coming up on NewsNight.
Coming up on NewsNight.
A young 6-year-old girl missing since 2019 has been found alive by police in New York. Paisley Schultes was found in a house 160 miles away from her hometown of Cayuga Heights. She was reported missing in July of 2019 when police strongly believed she was taken by her, quote, non-custodial parents. Police had even tried to enter the home multiple times, with the residents claiming they did not know anything about her whereabouts every time. After a long, nearly 3-year search, Paisley was found in a makeshift room under the stairs along with her kidnapper. Once entering the home, police noticed a flashing light under the stairs, finding her by ripping the staircase apart. Paisley was examined by doctors and found to be in good health, returning to her legal guardian's home. Kimberly Cooper was charged with custodial interference in the 2nd degree and misdemeanor endangering the welfare of a child. Kirk Schultes Sr. and Kirk Schultes Jr. were both charged with custodial interference in the 1st degree and misdemeanor endangering the welfare of a child. Schultes Jr. and Sr. were both released on bail, while Cooper remains in custody for an outstanding warrant. A New Hampshire middle school science class sent a 5.5-foot mini boat off the east coast of the United States in October 2020. It was just discovered in Europe 16 months after its initial departure. The middle school students helped assemble the boat and decorated it with a collage of artwork and messages before the Sea Education Association, located in Massachusetts, agreed to launch the mini boat into the Gulf Stream from Florida. The science teacher and class tracked the boat, called the Rye Riptides, by GPS for 10 months until it unexpectedly stopped sending data back. The GPS finally reported again on January 31st of 2022 from a small island off the coast of Norway. The class had been working with Educational Passages organization for the entire project, which posted a notice asking for someone to retrieve the boat. The message had made its way to the local news, where a 6th grader from the area heard about it. He asked his family to take him to the island, and sure enough, he discovered the remains of Rye Riptides, covered in barnacles. The boy brought it back to the school, where they opened the cargo hatch to discover the gifts the New Hampshire students had sent over. The Norwegian students plan to send a letter to the American school and hopefully meet them virtually. The boat that traveled 13,412 kilometers over 462 days has connected 2 middle schools from across the ocean. Ice fishing can lead to what? In Ohio, a mayor publicly suggested a connection that most did not expect. Reporter Aaron Ute will tell you more about what Mayor Craig Schubert thinks.
The mayor of a small city in Ohio resigned last Monday, February 14th, after he suggested permitting ice fishing could lead to prostitution. Hudson Mayor Craig Schubert, who has twice made national headlines with his unusual remarks since his wife has died in early September of last year, said his comments amounted to dry humor weaponized by political opponents. Schubert questioned the idea of allowing ice fishing, which he noted could come with accompanying shelter, at last Tuesday's city council meeting, stating, quote, "If you allow ice fishing with shanties, then that leads to another problem, prostitution," end quote. He informed the city of his immediate resignation last Monday in a terse letter to City Council Clerk Aparna Wheeler, which was copied to Council President Christopher W. Foster. Schubert, who is 65 years old, also released a public statement on his campaign website stating, quote, "My comments at Tuesday's workshop were made out of concern for our community, what could become of unintended consequences of new legislation, based on my prior television news reporting experience. My attempt to inject a bit of dry humor to make a point about this in the midst of a cold, snowy February was grossly misunderstood," end quote. He said foes have used remarks to engage in, quote, "personal destruction by means of character assassination, blaming me for the negative international press they helped me promote," end quote. Schubert's site says on a webpage that is no longer available that he is a former journalist who has worked for the Associated Press and appeared on television as a reporter and anchor. In 2018, he campaigned for an Ohio House seat but lost in the Republican primary that spring.
A Nebraskan state senator has been called for a criminal investigation after admitting that he took photos of a female staffer without her knowledge. Republican Senator Mike Groney said that he planned to resign this week to avoid putting his family through a public ordeal. The staffer, Christina Koneko, had filed a complaint against the senator after she found the photos on his laptop. Groney admitted to taking the photos of the staffer as he thought that the photos were not sexual in nature, and said, quote, "She's a very modest person, and I guess she was offended because she wasn't aware of the photos," end quote. However, reports describe the photos of the staffer as, quote, objectifying and demeaning. Gerween's resignation will be effective at 11:59 p.m. on Monday. After the break, we'll have your local news like what areas in Pittsburgh are facing trouble after a landslide. Also, hear from our reporters about what Point Park building will be relocating by the end of the calendar year. We'll be right back. With the recent bus incident, Port Authority has evaluated the 79 bridges they are responsible for to determine which needed upgraded. Each bus is evaluated every 2 years. Ones in poor condition receive a 4 on the scale by inspectors. This means that the bridge is in need of updating, but is not bad enough to cause harm or safety concerns. 9 of the 79 bridges were rated in poor condition, causing Port Authority to start designing updates over the course of the next 2 years. These bridges include 3 on the East Busway in Larimer, Shadyside, and Wilkinsburg, 2 in Bethel Park, and 1 on 7th Avenue in downtown. Port Authority will be using a mix of their own funds as well as state and federal to fund this project, seeing as Authority does not have the same review for federal funding as other municipalities. David Huffacker, Chief Development Officer, said, quote, "I feel very strong about where we are in our bridge program," end quote. In the midst of the Southern Busway closure, which shifted due to water in the concrete support, there is sure to be much construction in the Pittsburgh area. The upgrades for all 9 bridges have either started their design now or will within the next year. Earlier this week, a group of protesters rallied outside the City Council building to protest against the police violence in Pittsburgh. We sent reporter Jesse Dillon to cover the event.
It was raining on Tuesday, February 22nd, when around 100 people gathered at the City Council building in downtown Pittsburgh. Several local activist organizations came together to host a rally in support of Black lives. One Hood, Alliance for Police Accountability, and Trans Uniting were among those who helped put on the event, featuring speakers from each organization. This rally acted as a call to action as the families of some of those recently affected by police violence were in attendance. Families of Jim Rogers, Peter Spencer, Romir Talley, and Amari Lee were among those in the crowd. Speakers encouraged those in attendance to not give up the fight for justice. Brandy Fisher from the Alliance for Police Accountability stated, quote, "I implore you, don't just stand up. Don't just show up, stay in this fight forever," end quote. The rally concluded with music and dancing in the rain as to, quote, "not only highlight Black pain, but also Black joy."
Housed in the same building as the Young Women's Christian Association, or the YWCA, as well as the old home of NewsNight, the Center for Media Innovation is Point Park University's newest building. However, they will be moving in the coming months due to outside circumstances. Reporter Nick Konopka has more details.
With Point Park Center for Media Innovation set to move to the West Penn building, the School of Communications took suggestions from those who use it most. Last Thursday, Andy Conti, the director of the CMI, hosted a charrette where members of UView, the Globe, WPPJ, as well as their respective advisors, engaged in a discussion of the new center. The forum was intended to make the new CMI an even better place for students to create content and work together. Collaboration was touched upon by the students who felt that the new building's proximity to the Globe and WPPJ would foster greater partnerships between the two teams. Conti also broke down the twofold reason why the center is moving. He told participants that the YWCA building that the CMI resides in is being bought and will be retrofitted into condos. This coincided with the end of the 6-year lease that Point Park had on the space, making this the most optimal time to leave. The new space in the West Penn building is 800 square feet smaller than the current space, meaning that some facilities will not survive the move down the street. The TV studio, podcast room, and photography room are all set to survive. However, the whisper room used for voiceovers is expected to be a casualty. The Center for Media Innovation at West Penn is set to open by the end of 2022.
A new announcement regarding the schools and parishes under the Catholic Diocese of Pittsburgh came out this week. Reporter Erin Ute has more information.
The Catholic Diocese of Pittsburgh announced on Tuesday, February 15th, that it will take preliminary steps to ease COVID-19 restrictions in schools and parishes, beginning in parishes on Saturday, February 26th, and in diocesan elementary and high schools on Monday, February 28th. Masks will no longer be required except in limited circumstances. The following changes will take effect in parishes on Saturday, February 26th. Priests, deacons, and liturgical ministers in the sanctuary, as well as ushers and greeters, will no longer be obligated to wear masks at Mass. Parishioners will again be invited to share the sign of peace. Individuals can present the gifts of bread and wine used for consecration. The distribution of the precious blood from the cup still remains suspended at this time. All parish events outside of Mass may be held in person, and live stream options for Mass and activities will continue for those who are unable to attend in person. And effective for schools on Monday, February 28th, masks will no longer be required. However, masking will continue still on school buses as required by federal law. Masks will also be required for anyone who has tested positive for COVID-19 for 5 days after their return to work or school. The diocese said the number of new cases of COVID-19 has been steadily dropping in our area, and positive cases have declined in diocesan parishes and schools. And if the number of positive cases surge in a specific county or within a specific parish or school, mitigation measures, including mandatory masking, may be reinstated. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention still recommends universal masking in schools and large crowds.
A landslide is threatening backyards of homeowners on El Paso Street in the Morningside neighborhood. Resident Colleen Cernkovich said, "It seems like this whole slide is going all the way up and it stops at the bottom of my whole deck and the whole deck tipped over. Fire trucks can't get down here. Any type of big FedEx, they all back down to about here, stop, walk, and back out." End quote. Cernkovich wonders if a permanent fix will ever happen. State Representative Emily Kinkade proposed House Bill 1054 to try and help since no home insurance will cover the cost. This bill would be using the state's emergency management system and would establish special insurance and assistance funds to protect Pennsylvanians. Representative Kinkade said, quote, "It just became very, very clear that with all the different ways that people have been impacted by landslides, we need to provide some way for families to recover," end quote. She also thinks that the recent Pittsburgh bridge collapse highlights the need as there is potential for these landslides to affect bridges. Representative Kinkade introduced the bill in March of last year and is sitting in the Veterans Affairs and Emergency Preparedness Committee. Coming up after the break, we'll have all the details on your weekly Pittsburgh weather report with Craig Frykowski. Stick with us.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening, and welcome back to NewsNight. Most of the student body of the Pittsburgh Public School.
Some of the United States allies.
Thursday, the FBI was seen raiding.
Let's get started with today's forecast.
Today's high will only reach about 31 degrees.
It's looking a little cooler than we've seen in the past few weeks.
All this and more
All this and more
All this and more coming up on NewsNight.
coming up on NewsNight.
coming up on NewsNight.
Spring break is finally here. Time to take some time off and relax as we gear up to finish the semester. Will we be able to take some time outside? Thankfully, Craig Furkowski has your spring break weather report.
Thanks, Addie. It would be nice to see some warm temperatures over our spring break, but I don't think we'll be seeing much of that. Let's start off with tomorrow's forecast. Thursday, February 24th is going to have a high of 35 degrees with a 62% chance of both snow and rain showers. Luckily, any snow that we get will not stick. In the evening, the temperature will remain about the same, but we are more likely to see some steady rain. All this rain is expected to cause some higher river levels and maybe even some flooding. Now let's look at the rest of the week. Earlier this week, a flood advisory was issued on Tuesday around 3 p.m., and this alert will continue through the weekend to Monday evening around 7 p.m. Throughout the weekend, the rain will continue with Friday's 80% chance of rain and a high of 39 degrees. Saturday, Sunday, and Monday are hopefully drier, but they're not going to get much warmer. The warmest day this week is going to be Tuesday's high of 54 degrees, as well as March 4th's high of 58 degrees. Sadly, we won't be seeing anything too warm over break, but there are some days with lots of sun that you'll be able to try your luck outside. That's all I have for you until after break. Back to you, Addie.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of NewsNight. If you want to see more, check out our social media pages on both Facebook and Instagram at UView Television. You can also check out more episodes on our YouTube channel or our website uview.pointpark.edu. I'm Addie Deal, and from everyone here at NewsNight, thank you for watching and have a great evening.